Off our round of questioning today, we have Ms. Lantsman. Ms. Lantsman, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses for joining, and some for rejoining, given our committee being cut short last time. So I appreciate it. And I on that note, Mr. White, I wanted to give you the opportunity. You finished last in your comments in the last committee, and you talked about some of the operations that you have in the U.S. that basically help run food supply for emergency disaster relief in many states, and essentially having warehouses of trucks ready in the case of hurricane. And I wanted you to remark a little bit on getting not just food or key supplies across that border, but some of the bottlenecks that you faced, the border regulations, the red tape. If you could expand on that and perhaps provide a suggestion to the committee about how we can alleviate some of that.
Okay, thank you, and I'll be brief. I appreciate the opportunity to come back today after Friday's abrupt closure of the meeting. But on the topic and the question asked, across the U.S., across Canada, and across parts of Europe, we represent the food service distribution logistics business, supplying food products to the food away from home industries that we all enjoy, whether it's restaurants, hotels, and in addition, healthcare locations and whatnot. In particular to this question, the challenges that we faced a few times recently due to extreme wildfires in Alberta and British Columbia, as well as the extreme flooding, the challenges we faced and the suggestion relate to access in and out of the U.S. in a crisis of Canadian food products, North American food products, in order to serve British Columbia more effectively in a crisis, was highlighted. And so as we think about the challenges and the recent appointment of a Minister of Crisis Management, the recommendation is to look at ways to work in cooperation with the U.S. border and the U.S. government to expedite decisions on opening and allowing the free movement of food and emergency goods in and out of our countries in a crisis. And this is the topic we bring to the table here as important. We don't have suggestions on how to build second and third rail lines and highways in and out of British Columbia, because that's the real problem that exists, and that's why we have this challenge today. But it comes back to allowing a swift and efficient opening and closure of border access. What we found during the most recent challenges of the floods of British Columbia, the Canadian government was very supportive of conversations to work through border access in and out of Canada to allow support for BC. But we found that the pandemic challenges at the same time created the red tape that prevented us from moving in and out of the province swiftly. And food needs to move by the hour, not by the month. And especially in a crisis, getting food to hospital and dire locations in British Columbia, we were hindered with these challenges. That's
I actually have a follow-up, Mr. White, if you'll allow it. You talked a little bit. I think you mean the Minister of Emergency Preparedness.
That's the one. Yes.
Although I suspect that some would call him the Minister of Emergencies and Crises. But in terms of your discussions, were they had with the Minister of Public Safety, the Minister of Emergency Preparedness, with CBSA more broadly? Were you talking to a number of different people, and you weren't getting anywhere? I'm trying to understand what the bottleneck was for getting the decision that you needed to get in order to move food quickly across the border.
It was all the above, and there was not a concerted, cooperative, organized discussion. We'll call it central control point to help us and many other industries work through this.
Much, and thanks for coming back to committee. I'll move to, since we have Mr. Miller here, the Vancouver Port Authority. or the Vancouver Fraser Port Authority. In terms of what would be the single biggest bottleneck that the port faces? I know that you went through some of them in terms of certainly COVID, but containers, unavailable containers, rail lines. If you could pinpoint one or two issues that we can look into further, what would they be?
Frankly, right now, the biggest challenge is inconsistency and unpredictability. That's particularly problematic in terms of container shipping. That's normally the most predictable. Those are ships that normally run on a schedule, and you know when they're arriving and you know where they're going. The challenge now is that particularly with some of the lockdowns that have taken place in China and the things that have happened previously, you're just not sure when things are going to arrive, and that leads to a level of congestion that is problematic. That causes ripple effects right through the whole supply chain. So that really, at the moment, or over the past over the months since we progressed on the recovery from the natural disasters, that's really been the biggest single challenge.
It seems that between disasters and COVID, they're not one in a lifetime events anymore. They're becoming consistent events. So is there any planning or resiliency that from the Port Authority's perspective that is happening now to make these to see these as more regular events rather than events to plan for? Is there any planning within within your risk management planning that encompasses these events as now regular events?
Unfortunately, we're going to have to wait for the next round to hear the response to that question.
too
Thank
bad.
you very much, Ms. Lantsman.